The first person who recognizes you is your old boss. He enters the conference room 10 minutes late, drops a leather folder on the table, and begins talking before he sits down. He says the company only needs time. He says the missed payments are temporary. He says the bank does not understand the business. Then he finally looks at you. For a moment, his expression is blank. You used to sit outside his office, waiting for permission to speak. Now he is waiting for your decision. What are you doing here? You turn the loan file toward him. I'm part of the group that bought your debt. The room becomes quiet. He looks at the attorneys. Nobody corrects you. Years ago, he controlled your salary, your schedule, and whether you still had a job on Monday morning. Today, his company cannot make a major financial move without the approval of people on your side of the table. But your old boss is not the only familiar name in the portfolio. There is the restaurant owner who laughed at your car, the landlord who raised your rent and called you replaceable, the cousin who introduced you as the one who never really did much. Different people, different businesses, the same invisible thread connecting all of them. They spent years using borrowed money to look powerful. You spent those same years learning who received the payments. Eventually, their debts became your assets. This is not a story about revenge. At least that is not how it ends. It begins 15 years earlier, when nobody in that room would have believed you belonged there. At 23, your life looked unfinished. You rented a narrow room in a shared apartment above a noisy convenience store. Your car had faded paint, a weak air conditioner, and a warning light that disappeared whenever you hit the dashboard. Your job title sounded better than the salary attached to it. After rent, food, fuel, and bills, there was rarely enough left to feel like progress. The people around you seemed to move through life at a different speed. Your cousin bought a new car and posted the keys before the first payment was due. A former classmate opened a restaurant and filled social media with photographs of packed tables. Your landlord arrived every few months in another expensive vehicle. At work, your boss spoke constantly about risk, ambition, and the importance of thinking bigger. He also rejected your request for a small raise. At a reunion, the restaurant owner noticed your car. You still drive that thing. It still works. He laughed. You have to enjoy your money. You cannot live like you are waiting for permission. People nearby smiled. You smiled too. That night you drove home with the radio off. His question stayed with you. Were you being disciplined, or were you simply afraid to spend? The answer did not arrive immediately. It arrived a few weeks later at work. Your company was helping review a package of troubled business loans. The borrowers had missed payments. Some had expanded too quickly. Others had purchased equipment based on revenue that never arrived. The original lender no longer wanted years of negotiations, legal costs, and uncertainty. It wanted cash now, so the loans were being offered to specialized investors at a discount. A business might still owe $100,000. The lender might accept $40,000 today, rather than chase the full amount for 5 years. The buyer would receive the legal claim to future payments, settlements, or recoveries under the loan agreement. The borrower saw pressure. The investor saw an asset. One obligation, two completely different experiences. That afternoon, you watched a payment schedule move across the screen. Every month, money left a struggling business and traveled towards someone the borrower would never meet. The owner had the sign above the door. The lender had a claim on the future. For the first time, you understood that wealth was not always attached to the person holding the keys. Sometimes it belonged to the person holding the contract. You started studying after work. At first, distressed debt looked like a secret world built from intimidating language. Collateral priority, recovery rate, loan covenants, restructuring, default. You read financial statements until the numbers began telling stories. A crowded restaurant could still lose money. A property owner could look wealthy while having no cash. A company could announce record sales and still collapse under the weight of its repayments. The deeper you looked, the less impressed you became by appearances. But there was an obvious problem. You did not have enough money to buy entire business loans. You were not a bank. You were not a millionaire. And these deals were not sitting on a public app, waiting for anyone with $20. Your first access came through a small private credit partnership formed by experienced investors. The minimum investment was still painful, but it was possible after 2 years of saving. The partnership pooled money, purchased pieces of troubled loans, and handled the legal work. You were not personally knocking on doors or collecting payments. You owned a small economic share in a professionally managed portfolio. That detail mattered. Without it, the story would have been fantasy. With it, the first step was merely difficult. The first loan connected to a local printing company. The owner had borrowed to purchase 2 expensive machines after winning several large contracts. Then the contracts disappeared. The machines remained. So did the debt. The original lender wanted out. The loan was available for far less than the amount still owed. You invested most of your savings. The moment the money left your account, every intelligent reason for the investment disappeared from your mind. You saw only the risk. For 3 weeks, you checked your balance as though staring could reverse the decision. Then the partnership met with the owner. He expected threats. Instead, the discussion focused on whether the business could survive. The company still had customers. The machines were useful. The owner could make payments, but not at the original level. The loan was restructured. The term became longer. The monthly burden fell. The business stayed open. A month later, your share of the first payment arrived. The amount was small. Nobody would have called it success, but it was the first money you had received from ownership rather than labor. Your salary appeared only after you surrendered another month of your life. This payment appeared because an asset existed whether you were at work or asleep. You reinvested it. Then you waited. The second payment arrived. So did the third. Nothing changed visibly. The old car remained. The apartment remained. Your boss still spoke to you, as though your future depended on his approval. Underneath that ordinary life, a second source of income had started breathing. The early years were not smooth. One borrower stopped paying entirely. A piece of equipment listed as valuable collateral sold for almost nothing. Another business failed, while everyone involved was still discussing how to save it. Your portfolio lost money. That was when the fantasy ended and the education became real. A loan balance was not the same as value. A confident borrower was not the same as a reliable borrower. Collateral was worth only what someone would actually pay for it. You learned to ignore dramatic promises and study boring evidence. Cash in, cash out, assets that could be verified, payments the business could realistically afford. The less exciting the deal looked, the more carefully you considered it. Years passed. Your salary rose slowly. Your investment income rose unevenly. 1 month brought steady payments. Another brought a restructuring delay. A profitable deal could be followed by a loss. Still, the direction was changing. At 30, the portfolio produced enough to cover your groceries and utilities. At 32, it covered your rent. By 35, the annual income from investments was approaching your salary. Nobody around you knew. That was partly deliberate. You had watched too many people turn every financial improvement into a larger monthly obligation. A raise became a car payment. A bonus became a holiday booked before the money arrived. A profitable year became a larger house. Their income increased. So did the amount required to maintain the image. Your life remained almost visually unchanged. The car was replaced only when repairs stopped making sense. Your new apartment was quieter, not luxurious. You bought comfort where it mattered and ignored status where it did not. At another dinner with former classmates, the restaurant owner now controlled 3 locations. He spoke about expansion, staffing, and the difficulty of being responsible for so many employees. Then he asked whether you still worked at the same company. You said yes. He smiled. You always were the safe one. The table moved on. He saw a job title. He did not see the payments arriving outside it. He saw restraint and assumed limitation. You saw his third restaurant and wondered how much of it was financed. A year later, the economy slowed. Customers cut back. Food costs rose. Interest rates moved higher. Businesses built on cheap borrowing discovered that debt did not care whether the world had changed. The restaurant company looked successful from the street. The first location was still busy. The second survived on thin margins. The third had never worked. Closing it would have meant admitting the expansion was a mistake. So the owner kept feeding it money. One short-term loan covered another. Suppliers waited longer. Tax payments were delayed. Online, the company posted photographs of full tables. Inside the accounts, cash was disappearing. Then the payment stopped. One morning, your partnership received a new portfolio. You opened the file and recognized the restaurant name immediately. The same man, the same laugh, the same question about your car. His company owed more than $600,000 across several obligations. For a few seconds, the investment did not look like a loan. It looked like a stage. You imagined the meeting, his face when he recognized you, the moment he understood that the person he dismissed had become one of his creditors. Then another thought arrived. If you bought a bad investment because you wanted that moment, he would still be controlling you. The method would be different. The control would be the same. You closed the file. The next morning, you returned to the numbers. The original location produced cash. The second could survive. The third was destroying the company. The equipment had resale value. The brand still had loyal customers. Liquidation might recover something. A restructuring could recover more. The deal made sense without the history. Only then did you invest. Months later, the restaurant owner entered the conference room. The confidence was still present, but it had become fragile. He spoke to the advisors. He opened a spreadsheet. Then he noticed you. "What are you doing here?" "I invested in the loan." He looked around the room. "You bought our debt." "Part of it." For years, he had treated ownership as something obvious. A logo, a title, a set of keys. Now the invisible structure behind the business had entered the room. The landlord owned the buildings. Finance companies held claims on the equipment. Suppliers were still owed money. The lenders had rights over future cash flow. His name remained above the door. His freedom had become smaller with every payment the company could no longer make. You could have mentioned the old car. You could have repeated his words back to him. Instead, you asked which location still made money. The original one. The second. Barely. The third. He looked down. It was losing money. The solution was painful but clear. Close the third location. Sell unnecessary equipment. Extend the remaining debt. Lower the monthly payments to a level the surviving business could actually support. The agreement preserved 2 locations and most of the jobs. It also protected the value of the loan. Before leaving, he paused beside you. "How did you end up on this side of the table?" You thought about the years he never saw. The losses, the study, the decisions that looked boring from the outside. Then you answered, "While everyone else was buying things to look successful, I started buying the payments behind them." He left without responding. You expected the moment to feel larger. It did not. That surprised you. For years, part of you had carried the fantasy of being seen correctly. Now that it had happened, his opinion felt strangely irrelevant. Then the second familiar name appeared. Your old landlord. The man who once raised your rent with 2 weeks' notice and said there were 10 people waiting to replace you. He had used borrowed money to purchase several small apartment buildings. The properties looked valuable. The cash flow was weak. Repairs had been delayed. Vacancies increased. When interest costs rose, the portfolio stopped supporting itself. A commercial mortgage tied to one building entered a distressed sale. Your partnership reviewed it. The numbers were worse than the restaurant loan. This time you walked away. That decision mattered more than buying it would have. Years earlier, you would have wanted the emotional satisfaction. Now you could see a bad deal wearing a familiar face. The landlord eventually lost the building to another creditor. You earned nothing from his failure. You also lost nothing trying to own it. That was progress. The third name was your cousin. He had spent years presenting his life as proof that he understood money better than everyone else. New vehicles, expensive holidays, a large house purchased with a small deposit. He had also guaranteed a business loan for a friend. The business failed. The guarantee remained. Part of the debt appeared in a portfolio connected to your fund. You did not attend the negotiations. You did not reveal your involvement. There was no confrontation. Your cousin never discovered that a small part of his repayment flowed into an investment you owned. That was when you understood the title of your own life had changed. At first, you wanted the people who looked down on you to know. Later, it was enough that you knew. Then came your old boss. He had left the company and purchased a regional logistics business. For several years, it grew quickly. Growth created confidence. Confidence created borrowing. The company added vehicles, warehouses, and staff before the revenue was stable enough to support them. When a major customer left, the structure began collapsing. The loan was sold. You recognized his name on the guarantee. That brought you back to the conference room, the place where this story began. He sits across from you, explaining why the company only needs more time. Years ago, he controlled your salary. Today, you are helping decide whether his business receives another chance. The numbers are difficult. One warehouse is unnecessary. Several vehicles must be sold. Management expenses are too high. But the company still has customers and a viable core. A restructuring is possible. Your old boss studies the proposal. Then he looks at you. Are you enjoying this? The question catches you off guard. A younger version of you might have said yes. Instead, you tell him the truth. No. And you mean it. By then, their debts no longer feel like trophies. They feel like evidence. The restaurant owner expanded because stopping would have looked like failure. The landlord borrowed because property values seemed permanent. Your cousin guaranteed a loan because saying no felt disloyal. Your boss confused growth with strength. Different people, different decisions, the same mistake. Each had allowed an image, an expectation, or an emotion to make promises on behalf of their future income. You approve the restructuring because the business can survive, and the investment can recover more through patience than destruction. Not mercy, not revenge, discipline. That distinction becomes the final lesson. Owning debt gives you a claim on payments. It does not make you wiser than the borrower. It does not make you morally superior. It does not guarantee profit. Sometimes the lender is careless. Sometimes the investor is greedy. Sometimes the borrower used debt intelligently and was destroyed by circumstances nobody predicted. Money does not divide the world into heroes and failures. It reveals incentives. It exposes pressure. It shows who has options and who does not. By 40, your investment income exceeds your salary. A few years later, it covers your entire life. The change arrives quietly. You do not wake up feeling rich. You simply notice that fear has lost influence. A bad month no longer threatens everything. A family emergency does not automatically become a loan. A toxic manager cannot trap you with the danger of one missed paycheck. Your home is comfortable. Your car is reliable. Neither exists to make strangers reconsider your importance. Work becomes optional. You continue for a while because you still find parts of it meaningful. Then one morning, you resign. No dramatic speech. No final confrontation. You close the laptop, return the access card, and leave the building carrying a small box. Outside, nobody notices. That feels appropriate. For years, you believed the victory would be visible. The old boss recognizing you. The classmate asking how you did it. The cousin discovering you were wealthier than he imagined. But visible victory was never the thing you were actually building. You were building a life that could not be cornered easily. A life with enough margin to make decisions slowly. A life where saying no did not create immediate danger. A life where your time was not already promised to lenders, employers, and appearances. The people who looked down on you believed money was a ranking system. Better car, larger house, more impressive title. You eventually saw wealth as something else. Distance between a problem and panic. Space between an insult and a reaction. The ability to wait. The ability to leave. The ability to help without destroying yourself. The ability to remain ordinary without feeling invisible. Years after the first meeting, you pass the restaurant again. 2 locations survived. The third is gone. The owner is still there. He has become more cautious. The old landlord no longer owns the building you once rented. Your cousin drives a less expensive car. Your former boss runs a smaller but healthier company. Nobody was destroyed. Nobody became a villain in your story. Life simply forced each person to see the structure beneath the image. That structure exists everywhere. A house can carry your name while a bank holds the mortgage. A business can display your logo while lenders hold claims on future cash flow. A car can sit in your driveway while years of payments remain. Debt is not automatically bad. It can build homes, fund equipment, and create opportunities that would otherwise be impossible. But every loan is a promise made by your future self. For the borrower, that promise is an obligation. For someone else, it becomes an asset. The world notices the person holding the keys. It rarely notices the person receiving the payment. For a while, you wanted to become that invisible person because it felt like power. Eventually, you discovered something better. The greatest form of wealth was not owning the debt of everyone who looked down on you. It was reaching the point where their judgment no longer owned any part of you. They had spent money to look powerful. You had spent years becoming difficult to control. And in the end, that was the only kind of power worth keeping.